Hey ANPers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is ANP1, lecture test 5, and we're on video 5, and we're starting in the middle of page 6, where it says the classification of neurons. So there are different types of neurons, and we're going to talk about the different structural classifications. So let's turn on, I'm okay with red. Okay, so anaxonic. We know that an axon sends information. So this is multipolar neuron, looks like the one we've been drawing since the beginning. So an means without. So it's without an axon. It's got an axon, but you can't tell which one it is. So that's why it's called anaxonic. And these are found in the brain and special sense organs. Then we have the bipolar neuron. It has two poles. Poles are ends. Bi means two. So these are rare, and they're found in the special senses. So you have the soma or cell body in the middle with a dendrite on one end and an axon on the other end. And we will see these next semester in like the retina specifically. Unipolar neuron, uni for one, polar for end, one pole, one end. So you've got the dendrites here, and then the initial segment, and the whole rest of it is axon. And then the soma, the cell body, is off in the middle. And we will find these because these are the sensory neurons. And we will find these later this semester. These somas live together in clumps in the peripheral nervous system called ganglia. So anytime you have a clump of neuron somas in the peripheral nervous system, they will be a ganglion. One ganglion, two ganglia. And so these unipolars are sensory. And so we will find sensory ganglia later. Test 6. Maybe test 5. Definitely lab 4. So keep up with your lab 4 material. Okay, and then the multipolar is the most common, and these are your motor neurons. Motor. So lots of dendrites. Multi means many, poles mean ends. You've got lots of different dendrites here, and one axon that ends at telodendria with synaptic terminals, or axon terminals, or synaptic knobs. Okay, so these are the ones we've been drawing. They're the most common, and these are the ones we're most familiar with. Okay, and now the paragraph under these terms. Sensory / afferent neurons. Sensory neurons carry sensation, and they carry different types of sensation. They carry somatic sensation, visceral sensation, and special sensation. So there's 3 types of sensory neurons, 3 types of sensation. And they carry the sensation from the sensory receptors to the CNS. What's the CNS? Central nervous system. What are the 2 parts? Brain and spinal cord. You got it. And then the sensory ganglia are the ganglia that contain the cell bodies or somas of the sensory neurons. And the afferent fibers are the axons. The fibers are long and skinny, so afferent is sensory. Fiber in a nerve is the axon because it's the long skinny part. So an afferent fiber is the axon of a sensory neuron. Somatic sensory neuron monitor the outside world and your position in it. Did I skip a bit? Yeah. I skipped the paragraph. I said, let's do the paragraph, and then I went to the box on the next page. Okay, so let's finish the box on the next page. Sorry. Somatic sensory neurons monitor the outside world and your position in it. and we'll talk more about that. The visceral sensory neurons monitor the internal conditions and your organs. Okay, so let's go back. Most sensory neurons, back to bottom of page 6, most sensory neurons are unipolar. Sensory neurons are the afferent division of the peripheral nervous system. They emit synapses in the central nervous system, CNS, brain and spinal cord. All of the somatic motor neurons that control the skeletal muscles, are multipolar, which I said. Somatic motor neurons make up the somatic nervous system, the SNS of the efferent division of the peripheral nervous system, which is the PNS. Okay, and now the box on page 7, which we already said. Under the box on page 7, it says sensory neurons fit in which structural classification? Unipolar. And let's talk about interoceptors, exteroceptors, and proprioceptors. Do I have another one? Yeah, that's good. Okay, we're not, that's the next video. Okay. Interoceptors monitor the internal environment. So these are visceral sensory. Hungry, thirsty, horny, gotta pee, need to take a breath, need to exhale. Interoceptors, visceral sensory. Second bullet, exteroceptors, which actually should be typed in for you now. Exteroceptors monitor the external environment. So this will be touch, temperature, pressure, vibration, these types of things are exteroceptors. Proprioceptors monitor the position of the skeletal muscles and the joints. Have we talked about proprioception yet in these videos? I don't think we have. Okay, so proprioception is how you can shut your eye peeps and still touch your nose, because they monitor the position of the skeletal muscles and joints. So in the skeletal muscles and the tendons around the joints, you have proprioceptive proprioceptors, and they tell you where you are compared to yourself, not compared to space, right? So you're like go on a trip and you wake up in the hotel bed and you're not quite sure where you are. And your eyes aren't open yet. You're not sure which side of the bed you're on or which side the window's on or any of that. But with your eyes closed, you still know that your hands are curled up under you, or you're laying on your back, or you're all Marty McFly, or whatever it is. With your eyes closed, you can tell your position in space. You may not know what room you're in, what state you're in, or what side of the bed you're on, but you know that your hands are curled up, or that your hands are flat, or that your elbows are straight. Okay, you can tell these things about your body because proprioception. And there are some that argue that proprioception should be taught to the kindergartners as a sixth sense. The proprioception is such an important sensation. Okay, so the exteroceptors and the proprioceptors together are your somatic sensory. Those are both two different parts of your somatic sensation. I also want to take a second to note this root, this word root. Scepter, not like a SCEPTR, like you're the king and you're carrying the scepter. Excuse me, but the CEPTOR, scepter, is the same spelling as the word receptor, like a sensory receptor. So it's the same root. Anytime you see that root, scepter, CEPTOR, you know we're talking about a sensory receptor. And also that word that I probably used, monitor. The interoceptors monitor the internal environment. If we say monitor, we're talking about sensation, we're talking about afferent. We're not talking about motor, we're not talking about efferent. That has nothing to do with reception or monitoring, right? only afferent sensory. Monitor, receptor equals afferent equals sensory. Okay. All right, sensory neurons form the afferent division of the PNS. Afferent neurons deliver sensory information from the sensory receptors to the CNS. Excellent. All right, so that was all about sensory neurons. Should we do motor neurons? Let's make that another video because that's another page worth. All right, so thank you as always for tuning in, and happy Halloween. Here's my costume. I want to show you. I got a little cape going on back here. See? There you go. So thank you as always for tuning in. It's good to virtually see you here. The education must go on. Dr. J out.